Welcome to House of History. Last week we looked at Prussia Soldier King, Frederick Wilhelm, and what he meant for Prussian history. As he ascended to the throne, within days it became evident he was the polar opposite of his art and pleasure-loving and much-liked father. He immediately cut all unnecessary costs, expanded his military to a near ridiculous degree, and as a result a strong and efficient civil service developed. Now, I briefly touched upon his court life in the previous video. Due to his preference for sober, robust manners and deprecating humor, his close circle of confidants consisted of military men, crude, blunt and masculine. In this Tabakskollegium or tobacco ministry, the men maintained a form of raw humor that didn't just border on bullying, but consisted of absolutely tormenting any poor victim they decided to set their eyes on. In this video, we'll have a closer look at Prussia's Tabakskollegium and the anecdotes of their royal bullying. Something that made a surprising impact on me, as the sheer venomous conduct of these men honestly astounded me and put the Soldier King in a different light completely. Upon ascension in 1713, the Soldier King cut spending and fired the majority of staff that had been working at Prussian court for decades. A particular example is that of Johann von Besser. He had served at the Prussian court under the Soldier King's father since 1690 and was the central person shaping the culture of Prussian royal court. Aside from the detailed description of the first king's coronation, he had methodically described all rituals observed at court for years. It was his life's work, if you will. Now, without any warning, he was stripped of his rank and fired. When he wrote a letter to the Soldier King asking him to reconsider, the letter is said to have been thrown into the fireplace, unread. Johann's life's work collapsed around him, and his case is telling for many others that suffered similar fate in those early weeks of the Soldier King's reign. A British observer described the contrast between father and son in 1716, as the late King of Prussia was scrupulous in ceremonies of the greatest nicety. His present majesty, on the contrary, has scarce left the least footsteps of it. Replacing court life was the lean and masculine Tabakskollegium. Generally, this ministry consisted of around 8 to 12 military men and senior officials, often supplemented with adventurers and travelers that happened to pass by and were invited by the king. The conversations were held while enjoying strong alcohol and tobacco pipes. Primary sources from those meetings show that the setting was informal, raw, with one of its rules being that rising for the king was not necessary when he entered the room, something that was more or less common practice everywhere else throughout Europe. The men talked about religion, the news, political developments, and about their hunting adventures. It was expected all those participating, including the occasional traveler that joined, did not hold back with debates and discussion. Considering the alcohol-fueled atmosphere, this led to considerable debates and even fights. Sources reveal that occasionally the Soldier King encouraged and roused these fights. Alright, so one of the anecdotes I briefly touched upon in the video about the Soldier King was the visiting professor from the University of Helmstedt, August Hagerman, together with then-famous writer David Fassmann. These men attending the Tabakskollegium upon invitation one night got into a fight, which degenerated into a mudslinging match. Eventually the debate deteriorated to Fassmann hitting Hagerman with such force that the latter nearly fell onto the king. Asking the king whether it was not the most punishable thing to behave in such a way in the presence of him, the king is said to have replied, "A scoundrel deserves the blows he receives," obviously enjoying the whole scene unfolding in front of him. Now, the absolute worst anecdote of the viciousness of the Tabakskollegium is the story of Jakob Paul von Gundling. Educated at multiple universities in both Swiss and German territories, Gundling eventually settled in Berlin during the intellectual blossoming at the court of the Soldier King's father. Himself an intellectual heavyweight, Gundling managed to obtain a teaching post at the school for sons of the Prussian nobility, and he became the historiographer of the chief herald's office. Basically, he occupied himself with checking the genealogy of noble applicants for public office. I think it's safe to say that for a historian with an insatiable curiosity and incredible intellectual prowess, Gundling truly managed to find a great place for himself in the 18th century Prussia. And then in 1713, the first king in Prussia passed away, and his son, the Soldier King, succeeded him. Suffering the same fate as everyone else, Gundling's position was near instantly abolished. Nevertheless, Gundling was resilient and managed to stay at Prussian court as an advisor on economic policy, molding himself after the new king's wishes and attitude. In reward, Gundling was rewarded titles such as commercial counselor and even the presidency of the Academy of Sciences. Another reward, and I use quotation marks for that word, was the fact that Gundling was invited to meetings of the Tabakskollegium. Up until his death in 1731, Gundling was a high-ranking member of the Prussian court, though after 1713 the way he was treated at court changed dramatically. Within several months of the Soldier King's radical changes at court, Gundling's position degenerated into a figure of ridicule and torment for the enjoyment of other members. This learned man became quite literally the laughingstock. In February 1714 already, the Soldier King ordered Gundling to deliver a lecture for guests on ghosts, whilst forcing him to take strong drink whilst lecturing. At one point, Gundling got drunk to the degree that he had to be escorted back to his room by Prussian grenadiers, where he was met by a ghost, a person draped in a white sheet, startling him. Gundling shrieked with terror, and this was one of the milder pranks played on him. Other sources reveal that he was once locked up in a pit with beer cups, whilst men shot fireworks at them from above. He was forced to wear clownesque court attire, loosely modelled on French court clothing, but obviously to make a mockery of him. Laxatives were put in his food, and after he finished dinner, not realizing what he had just eaten, he was thrown in prison for a night, and once he was goaded in a pistol duel with one of his tormentors, with everyone except him aware that the guns did not contain bullets. Gundling refused to fire his pistol at his tormentor. In turn, he was shot at with burning powder, setting fire to his wig, much to the amusement of everyone present. Due to his increasing debts, Gundling was unable to leave Berlin and the Prussian court. Over time, he turned into the court jester, tormented by the king and his confidants. The psychological effect of this hopelessness seems evident. Gundling started drinking excessively. The fact that he did so, ironically, only made him an even more suitable target. A full-fledged alcoholic in record tempo, his situation at court can only be described as horrible. To his credit, during this time, Gundling did manage to write and publish a multitude of learned publications on a broad variety of subjects. That's what makes him so interesting. He continued his academic work with resilience and determination. It gained him the name Der Gelehrte Narr, or the learned court jester. Gundling published works of the history of Tuscany on imperial German law and the topography of the electorate of Brandenburg. Though a mind to respect, the pranks played on him at court got crueler as time progressed. As a play to his alcoholism, the king decided it would be fun to build a life-size wine barrel for Gundling. He was told it would be his coffin and placed in the corner of his bedroom so that he was confronted with it every day. On it, the verse was inscribed, "Here there lies within his skin, half pig, half man, a wondrous thing. Clever in his youth, in old age not so bright, full of wit at morning, full of drink at night. Let the voice of Bacchus sing. This, my child, is Gundling. Reader, say, can you divine whether he was man or swine?" And when Gundling finally passed away in 1731, after nearly 2 decades of extreme bullying, in a morbid display of complete lack of empathy, the king decided to display his corpse to the public. It was propped up in the barrel with a long wig and extravagant costume was put on him. It was a hint at the court of the Soldier King's father, and towards everything the king himself resented. Many people saw this morbid display, travelers and citizens alike, some describing what they had seen in letters. Now Gundling was buried together with the barrel next to a church outside of the city. Ironically, the funeral address was given by the writer David Fassmann, who we know from the fight with another professor. Fassmann was known as being one of the tormentors of Gundling. A very sad end for the man indeed. Personally, I think that these stories about the Soldier King's court say a lot about the path Prussia now developed towards. It was much more raw, masculine, and perhaps even sadistic. Whereas the main video about the Soldier King, we discussed the incredible expansion of the army and civil service, basically providing Frederick the Great with stepping stones to create a great power out of Prussia. There was a flip side to this obsession with the military and sober court lifestyle. Next week, we will look at the horrible relationship between the Soldier King and his son, who would eventually become Frederick the Great. It's not really a lot of pleasant stories. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video, and make sure you check out the playlist with the complete history of Prussia on the screen. I would also like to thank all my patrons for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and want to support my work, consider checking me out on Patreon. For just $1 a month, you will gain access to the exclusive Patreon series. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.